Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. May the 4th be with you and all that good stuff. So it's May 4th. Let's see. The sun is shining here in Southern California, not a cloud in the sky. So shaping up to be a great Monday. We've got my father, Dr. Wallach, with us again today to talk about a couple different things. One of, I get a lot of questions about the 10 bad foods and what constitutes good foods and all of that. And, my father's been lecturing about this for probably as far back as I can remember. So more than 50 years. And so he is clearly an expert on the good foods and bad foods. But, we've all probably seen and read the things, for instance, let food be thy medicine and those sorts of things. And one of the things I've always been taught and believed to be very true is that dietary supplements are really an extension of foods. And so a lot of things that that do us good come from some food source, and certainly dietary supplements and nutrients are those. And the definition of a nutrient is a beneficial thing that the body can use that obviously we get from typically our foods. Certainly our bodies were designed to get our nutrients from foods. And so we're going to talk about that because it's a hot topic and continues to be a hot topic as to what is a good food, what is a bad food, and certainly what are the 10 bad foods that Dr. Wallach talks about all the time. And so we're going to start there, but I've got my Be the Change coffee this morning, which is among my favorites, of course, in terms of longevity products and certainly in terms of coffee. So good morning, Dr. Wallach and Dad.
Well, good morning, sir. Okay, Mr.
So
President.
let's jump into it. Let's jump into what are the bad foods? Let's start there.
Okay, well, let me give an example first.
Okay.
Let's go back 100 years ago during the Spanish flu. 20 million people from India died of the flu. 100 million people, actually, I think it was 103 million people actually contracted the Spanish flu. 20 million died. Okay. And then you look at India today, 30,000 have contracted the COVID virus and 1,000 have died. Huge difference. So what's the difference? Well, prior to 1918, when the Spanish flu hit us, the people from India were doing all the bad stuff, eating the bad foods, and today they're not eating the bad foods. So you go from, to 20 million dead 100 years ago and converting to the good foods. Now there's only 1,000 dead. There's a big difference. When you look at the pre-existing conditions that afflict people who have COVID and are more likely to die when they have these pre-existing conditions, they're all nutritional deficiency diseases, one of which is not, the most primary one is not even listed. It should be number one, which is osteoporosis. And I spent a lot of time over the last couple of weeks redoing autopsies that were published online. And I asked the same question. What was the cause of death? They say, oh, we had 400 COVID deaths. Okay, what was the cause of death? Well, I had to go look all that up because nobody was saying what the cause of death was in these COVIDs. Okay, it turns out that capillary hemorrhage is high, okay, as a cause of death. Also, people get these infections because they have low platelets. They bleed because they have low platelets, and they get the infections because they don't have any white blood cells. Well, our immune system includes white blood cells, platelets, antibodies, all of which are formed in the bone marrow. What's happening is people have a high rate of fibrous dysplasia of the bone marrow, which means that the bone marrow cavity, which makes white blood cells and platelets and red blood cells and antibodies, gets filled up with scar tissue, and all those cells are gone and you can't make what they're supposed to make. That's why kids, when they get the COVID virus at 3, 5, 8, 10, 12, 15 years of age, they get a minor cold symptoms, maybe even a half a degree fever, and that's it. Now, once you're 60 years old and older, you've acquired all these pre-existing conditions because you've been eating bad foods all these years, okay, and doing the bad things all these years. And so suddenly now, the death rate is extremely high. It's like 98% of the people who die have these pre-existing conditions, which are all these nutritional deficiencies, and they're dying of hemorrhaging. They're dying of secondary infections, and not really the COVID virus. Okay, so let's go back to India 100 years ago. What were they eating? Well, wheat came from India, Iran, and Iraq, thousands and 8,000-10,000 years ago. And so people in India, they were eating wheat. Their intestines were all damaged with celiac disease. They couldn't absorb nutrients. And so when the H1N1 came through there, AKA Spanish flu, it wiped out more people than most countries have people in India. Well, today, the biggest rice eaters in the world are from India. Okay, so now they're eating rice, which has no gluten in it. Okay, so they don't get the problems that you get with gluten, which are celiac disease, so you can't absorb nutrients, even if they're in your food or even if you supplement. And so now only 1,000 have died compared to 20 million 100 years earlier. So that's the difference. And so it's very, very important to avoid the bad foods. And anybody who says, oh, you can just eat well and get most of what you need, that's not true. Any doctor who said that should be put in jail for reckless endangerment. There's a few places on Earth where you can get some minerals. 2/3 of the 90 essential nutrients are minerals. There was a book written about it called Lost Horizon. There was a movie made about it in 1933 because those people lived to be 250 to 300 years of age. They had the highest rate of longest lived people on Earth in this one place because the glaciers, the Giltar Glacier, was grinding up all the minerals in the rocks and the canyons and things, and they were using those waters for cooking and irrigating and drinking and so forth and getting the minerals. Well, essential minerals occur in veins like chocolate and chocolate ripple ice cream. They occur in veins like gold and silver and coal. They don't occur in a uniform blanket around the crust of the Earth. Over 100 years ago, before we had electricity, our source of nutritional minerals uniformly around the world was wood ashes. People would take wood ashes from their wood stoves and their fireplaces and throw the wood ashes in the gardens. And they didn't know why the garden grew better, but they knew the gardens grew better with wood ashes. That's because wood ashes are like 90% minerals.
I heard, let me jump in at that, because I heard something this morning that's unique about May 4th that ties into that. And I found it really interesting because it ties into exactly what you're talking about. In England, where the chimney sweep came from, they used to use children because the chimneys were very narrow. And so the chimney sweeps would collect.
Chimney sweeps, yeah.
Chimney sweeps, yeah. They would collect the wood ash, and the people that would clean all the chimneys and the fireplaces would take all that wood ash and sell it to the farmers. Mm-hmm. So I found that interesting, and it's tied to May 4th because it was a day off for the chimney sweeps apparently. But so anyway.
Okay, so that kind of sets the stage. All vertebrates, including human beings, that's why my thesis is in the Smithsonian Institute's National Treasure. We found that all vertebrates, including human beings, require these mineral nutrients, 60, 2/3 of the 90, and they prevent diseases that doctors yet today say are genetic or autoimmune and so forth. They're really just simple nutritional deficiency diseases, things like lupus and fibromyalgia and that kind of stuff. They're really just nutritional deficiencies, and they make up some of the pre-existing conditions that people have that are going to die if they get the COVID. Okay, because their bone marrow cavities are filled up with scar tissue. They can't make white blood cells. They can't make antibodies to defend themselves. They can't make platelets to prevent from bleeding to death. It was a big cause of death during the Spanish flu. When you look up the cause of death from the Spanish flu, it was hemorrhage. People, they weren't dying of pneumonia, even though they called it the Spanish flu. They were dying from hemorrhage. They were bleeding through their nose. They were throwing up blood. They were pooping blood. They were peeing blood. Their blood was coming out of their ears and their eyes, because they couldn't make platelets because they were eating wheat for 10,000 years and nobody had any bone marrow cells that actually help the bone marrow make platelets and red blood cells and so forth. So this is where our problem is. Okay, it's not how much you eat, it's what you eat and what you supplement with, because plants only require 3 elements from the soil to make good seeds for the next generation. We need 60. So most people are 57 short. And anybody who says, just eat well, you're going to get most of what you need, that would be the same as saying to you, if you had a Lamborghini, Lamborghinis have 12 cylinders or 6 or 8. I don't know. But let's say
that McDonald's bun doesn't have 90 essential nutrients in it. I remember you telling the story about Wonder Bread and why it's called Wonder Bread.
Because you wonder what's in it. Yeah. And so, at any rate, you go to your mechanic and say, okay, I've got a 12-cylinder race car here. This thing is beautiful. I want to take it up to Indy and run around the track with it. Do I need to put special oil in there? Nah, don't waste your money in special oil. Just take dirt from Texas and dirt from Oklahoma and put in the car. There's bound to be some oil in there. An insane person wouldn't do that to their car. Yet when a medical doctor says, oh, just eat well, you get everything you need, everybody does that. And that's why we have a problem. So you do have to supplement to guarantee they're going to give your body the 90 essential nutrients. Your bone marrow is doing what it's supposed to do. Make platelets to prevent bleeding to death, make white blood cells to attack viruses, make antibodies to kill and attack viruses, to make red blood cells to carry oxygen, and so forth. And
that is amazing to me still to this day that, people will listen to their medical doctor about dietary and nutritional advice and information, and yet medical doctors have no requirement to study diet and nutrition.
That's right.
It's usually a blind spot for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that's why they would say, oh, just eat well, you're going to get everything you need. That's said out of ignorance. And of course, as a result, that one sentence kills more people than COVID, right? Because this
by far.
Yeah, this is why we have all these pre-existing conditions. So at any rate, the bad foods, when you look at now, let's look at Italy versus Germany now in current times. The Italians have the highest rate of death from the COVID-19. It's 10%. Ours is 3%. The Germans have 0.5%. They're next door neighbors. Okay, so what's the difference? Well, the Italians have been eating for over 10,000 years gluten, wheat, barley, rye, and oats. They still eat gluten, wheat, barley, rye, and oats, spaghetti, pasta, pizza crust, mustacholi, all that kind of stuff, spaghetti and noodles and so forth.
There's no gluten in coleslaw?
It may, depends on what the dressing's made out of, okay? But the Germans eat potatoes. The Germans were famous for German potato salad and baked potatoes and so forth. So the Germans primarily get their carbohydrates from potatoes, corn, and rice. I've got that from 10 different sources, okay? Where the Italians get most of their carbohydrates from wheat, barley, rye, and oats, okay? And so as a result, for 10,000 years, the Italians get hit hard every time something like this comes through because they don't have the white blood cells to defend themselves. They don't have antibodies to defend themselves. They don't have platelets to defend themselves. And they bleed to death, okay? Now, and it's because they're eating the bad foods. Okay, so let's go over the bad food. This is how important it is to avoid the bad foods. You don't want to be dipping breadsticks in olive oil. It's for our bread or toast or something like that. Waffles, pancakes, the breakfast of champions, Wheaties, things like oatmeal. And then you have, of course, a cream of wheat. You're giving little babies. All right. All of these things have gluten in them. No, can't have them.
Now you brought up pancakes, so I have to jump in for a moment. Let's see. With like Longevity Go Foods pancake mix, it's gluten-free, tested gluten-free. So it's not that the pancakes are bad; it's the gluten contained in some pancakes is bad.
Well, when you're in Italy, you're going to have pancakes that are made from wheat. If you're in a longevity family, you're going to be eating pancakes that are made from gluten-free flour.
But my point, I guess, is that it's what's contained in pancakes traditionally is what's bad. It's the gluten from the wheat.
Yeah, but just again, go back to the Spanish flu 100 years ago. The people in India had been eating wheat for 15,000 years. And when it came through, it killed 20 million of them, infected.
Well, in the Roman army, you said it at one time. I remember you talking about the Roman army was actually brought down not by enemies, but by
malaria,
essentially a pandemic, right? So
spaghetti. Yeah.
From spaghetti.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's one of those things where, if you can get spaghetti that's made from buckwheat, okay, or rice, you're fine. But if you don't know what that spaghetti is made out of, don't eat it, because it's probably wheat. Because if they've gone to the trouble to make it out of rice, they're going to have, say, gluten-free, rice-based, and whatever. And so you have to look at the ingredients. And I used to think that Asian foods were, all rice. And I used to eat sushi 3 days a week for lunch or dinner. Oh my gosh, and what a wonderful thing. It's made from seaweed and rice and avocados and salmon. And then one day I got a rash, and so I said, this feels like gluten here. And so I went and asked the company, I said, do you guys make your own sushi? Well, we used to, but the guy who was famous for it in our company, he retired and nobody else could make it like him. So we started just buying it, from a commercial producer. Do you have one of those boxes? Because Milan and I would eat there 3 days a week. Yeah. So bring me the box. On the back, there's 3 sources of wheat flour in the sushi, commercially prepared sushi. And the wheat flour is used to hold the rice granules in the sushi rolls so they wouldn't fall out when they were being served. Okay, so they had added the wheat flour to sushi, which had been gluten-free for thousands and thousands of years, okay, but because they didn't have an artist to make it properly, they threw the wheat in to hold it together. So you really have to read labels because you are not what you eat, you are what you absorb, okay, very important. And of course, there's bagels and cookies and donuts and all this stuff. And so you really have to read labels and make sure that they're all made from things that don't have any, even things like malted milk. That sounds harmless, malted milk, or kind of like a super milkshake. Well, what was the malted piece? Well, the malted piece was malted rye grain, okay, to thicken the malted milk and give it more oomph. Well, it gave more oomph, all right, but they got gluten. And so you really want to watch it. And as a result, when you don't absorb these things, these nutrients, because your intestines are damaged from the gluten, you get celiac disease, which we knew 8,000 years ago. A Greek physician noted that all the people who died from celiac disease, which was a big, big problem 8, 10, 12,000 years ago, intestinal problems, he said every one of them eats wheat. He said that 8,000 years ago. Then 2,250 years ago, 250 BC, Roman physicians said everybody with severe celiac disease, or the most common side effect is osteoporosis. Well, when you get osteoporosis, guess what? Your bone marrow cavity gets clogged up with scar tissue. Okay, you get this conversion of your cells in your bone marrow that make white blood cells and red blood cells and antibodies and platelets. Okay, it turns into a dysplasia, it's called, okay, fibrous dysplasia. It all turns into just like tendon-like materials, which can't make anything. And so that's our problem. That's why that should be the number one thing in the pre-existing conditions for people who die from the COVID virus. These are the wheat eaters, and we didn't quite get to that. I think maybe we did. That the Italians eat wheat, and their death rate is 10% from COVID. And their next door neighbors, the Germans, their carbohydrates come from potatoes and corn and rice, and they have the lowest rate of death from the COVID, 0.5.
So we've spent a lot of time on gluten because we're going to run out of time by the time we get to many more of these bad foods. Yeah. So let's get the next one. So gluten is the top of the list.
That's right.
That's the big daddy of bad.
Yeah, pinnacle of the pyramid. Okay. And so at any rate, and then oils are bad, okay, because they oxidize and turn into trans.
But not all oils are bad. We're not talking all.
Potentially all oils are bad if you heat them. Okay, even good oils are bad if you heat them, right?
Well, then they turn into bad oils.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Or like fish oil, EPA, DHA. I mean, these are part of the essential nutrients.
They're essential nutrients. But then you go to a restaurant and there's a bottle of salad dressing sitting on the table, been there every day for 6 months, right? And they just keep adding to it as it goes away. And at the room temperature and everything. And you put that on your salad with your croutons? I don't think so. You gotta stay away from all that. Okay. And
only if you have breadsticks with it.
Yeah, exactly. And so then, of course, let's see here. What else is bad? Oh,
So let's hold on. So let's stay on oils. So for a second. So we're talking primarily vegetable oils are automatically bad, right? So sunflower oil, canola oil, stuff like that.
Okay, here's the deal. If you eat sunflowers, which are fresh, okay, and you eat the sunflowers, there's oil naturally in those sunflowers, that's okay. But if those sunflowers have been stored for a year or 2 years, that's why there's dates on our products, because
then it's rancid oil potentially, right? So it's oxidized oil and potentially aflatoxin, which you've talked about, kills bears. So
well, it kills everybody. Why do poor people America have a higher rate of liver cancer than rich people? Well, that's because they get the thrift store bread that's contaminated with Aspergillus mold, which makes aflatoxin, which creates liver cancer. And I discovered that in bears in 1967 when I came back from Africa. It was the first thing at Marlin Perkins. He gave me a list of things to solve for him. He says, every species of bear, polar bear, black bear, grizzly bear, Kodiak bear, sun bear, every type of bear in zoos in the world is dying from liver cancer, and the geneticists say it's genetics. Say, no, do you have a barn here or a place where you store bear food? Yeah, let's go look. So I stopped at I hadn't even taken my jacket off. Marlin Perkins picked me up at the airport. And so we stopped by the zoo house and picked up a UV light, a black light. And he took me to this barn. It's full of all these old loaves of bread from a thrift store.
Okay. Well, I think we talked about this part of the Marlin Perkins story and your history. I think when we talked about selenium, which brings up another point, each month I'm trying to put out a blog post. And so from our discussion on selenium, I took a lot out of that, plus the story that, the history that I've lived around all of that in our health claim petitions that you filed and young Jody filed, along with people like the great Dr. Gerhard Schrauzer and so forth. And so so my May 1st blog post, which I think Michelle's going to share on Facebook today, goes through a lot of that history. But I want to stay on the 10 good foods, 10 bad foods. So the oils, it's the rancidity in general, but there's some bad oils, the vegetable oils. Then they use vegetable oil to replace butter and turn into margarine and all that crazy stuff too, right?
No, because they actually cause cancer and they cause plaque in the arteries. Cholesterol is your best friend. Cholesterol does not cause plaque in the arteries. Cholesterol does not cause heart disease. Cholesterol makes up 95% of the weight of testosterone and estrogen. If you want ED, guys, give up cholesterol. Take some statin drugs. You won't have any good times anymore. Won't make any more babies. And then also, if you give up cholesterol, you're going to get Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease is a cholesterol deficiency. So stay away from margarines. Stay away from oils that are not properly, what should I say, processed. You got to be fresh.
You recommend people consume eggs, right? Good source of cholesterol, good source of protein.
3 eggs for breakfast this morning. I'll have 3 eggs for lunch, and I'll have 3 eggs for dinner tonight.
So you should use Pam or canola oil to make those eggs?
No.
Or no?
Use butter.
Butter, okay. So, but you can make butter into a bad thing also, right?
It. Yeah.
If you overheat it. So
just slightly.
So how do you recommend good, better, best eating eggs?
Okay, what I do is I like to soft poach them, and then I just put a couple of pats of butter right out of the refrigerator on the eggs, and it melts at the egg temperature, which is like 60, 70 degrees or something like that point. And so the butter slowly melts. And I had a baked sweet potato with butter on it as well this morning. I had
this is one of the things that it's kind of crazy, but I would say this is one of your biggest vindications, because I remember you lecturing 30 years ago, 40 years ago, maybe more, to stay away from margarine. You'd go through people's kitchens and throw it away, and people called you crazy back then, and you're paid by the dairy council or the cattle council or the the Butter Council or something. I don't know. And so because you as vehement as you talk about gluten and avoiding gluten today, you talked about avoiding margarine back then and since. But what's changed is now everybody with other than the margarine salesman probably, virtually everybody promotes the benefits of butter now, and that that it's not bad for you, that it's good for you, that it's actually a health enhancing food. And so, I think it's crazy because when dead doctors don't lie, the audio lecture went viral before people knew what viral was, and we're not talking about today's virus stuff, but viral in a good way. And so before the internet, that audio cassette tape, your lecture went viral around the world in multiple languages. One of the key takeaways on that lecture, which you had been giving that lecture long before it was recorded and duplicated and handed out, was to avoid margarine, and to butter's better, to eat butter. And so, from that standpoint, I just point out that, again, this is one of the probably the biggest vindications, because it was one of the craziest points of contention among your critics back then, that you would, how dare you would tell people to stay away from margarine and embrace butter.
Well, they're selling margarine as a way to prevent plaque in your arteries and heart disease, which was a total lie.
And you knew it was wrong in the reverse all along.
That's correct, because I'm a pathologist, and very few people have done as many autopsies, as many species of vertebrates as I have. That's why my thesis is in the Smithsonian Institute.
Well, that's the benefit of original research, actually doing the research yourself, of seeing it, not just believing what you've read.
Well, one of the biggest oil questions I get, Steve, around the world is, well, what about these aromatherapy oils, Wallach? You keep pushing aromatherapy oils, and you say, well, it's bad. Well, aromatherapy oils are not oil. Chemically, they're called an ester. They're 2 carbons long, and they're not an oil. They don't have double bonds in them and things like that. So chemically, they're not really classified as an oil. They're an ester, and so they're quite safe. Even they were classed as an oil thousands of years ago because they were slippery like other oils, and so they just put them into the same piece. But chemically, they're not an oil, so they're quite safe. They don't oxidize. That's why you can put some eucalyptus oil on your shelf, and 1,000 years later, it'll still be good. It won't oxidize because it's not an oil, it's an ester. So that's another piece. And then fried foods are very, very, and this is why when you look at Louisiana, next to New York State and California and Washington State, the next state that has the worst rate of COVID is Louisiana. And 70% of the people who get COVID infections and death in Louisiana are Black men. Okay, so why is that a genetic thing? No, it's the way they eat. They eat everything fried. That's the nature of that community there in Louisiana, is everything's fried. And the men tend to drink beer when they're working because it's hot and humid and sweat. And so they drink a lot of beer, which is made from gluten. And then women there, well, why are they only 30%, men are 70%? Well, the women, even Black women, prefer to drink wine, which has no gluten in it compared to beer. If you're going to drink beer, nothing wrong with that, but drink Japanese and Chinese beer made from rice. Okay. Do not fry anything. There's 2 bad things about frying. Number one, you superheat fat. Okay. You also superheat oils, and they sprinkle things like fried chicken and fried fish with what? Wheat. And then they fry it in oil. So you're getting a double hit there from the wheat, gluten, and also you're frying it in oil. And so it's very, very bad. And this is why they have 70% of the people in Louisiana are Black men who get COVID and who die from COVID. It's the eating habits. And so if that changes, everybody gets off all the bad stuff, and they take their 90 essential nutrients, they absorb the nutrients, there won't be any more COVID problems. If you 70-year-old people will be just like a 3-year-old who gets it. It'll be minor cold, common cold-like symptoms.
So with fast food restaurants on pretty much every corner in throughout the United States selling fried this, fried that, French fries, fried chicken, all of those things, how do we have a chance? Heart disease is the leading cause of death in the United States still. Yeah. One, depending on which statistic you look at, 500,000 to 1.5 million Americans die each year from heart disease and heart-related events. around something like a sudden death, heart attack, or stroke, and so forth, which all tend to be interrelated, I think. But so
sudden death heart attacks, particularly in young people, even sudden death syndrome is caused by deficiency of a single mineral called selenium.
selenium, sure.
Yeah, and so that's a little bit different. But then, if you're eating all the bad foods, the selenium deficiency is going to be 10 times worse. And so it's one of those things where they're all kind of intertwined. And but fried foods are extremely dangerous. Okay, they taste good, they're very seductive, they smell good, they taste good, but they will kill you. Okay, they will kill your bone marrow cells, not because they attack. Sometimes, in some cases, by heating the oils, they will actually oxidize and kill your bone marrow cell directly. But even worse, when you're getting the gluten, you're not absorbing the nutrients necessary for your bone marrow to make white blood cells and red blood cells and platelets and antibodies. And so you're getting a double hit that way. Sugar's bad, okay. A little bit of sugar makes the medicine go down, but we're talking about a little bit of sugar. You know, we're talking about a couple of drops of honey. We're not talking about 3 tablespoons of sugar on your oatmeal for breakfast. That's a bad
thing. So sugar is an interesting topic. So again, going back as far back as, you know, us growing up, you raising us little kids, you know, we didn't get sugary foods. We didn't get soda pop and things like that growing up, and our kids don't either. So in terms of sugar, you know, there's again, I would say varying degrees of even good as an alternative in terms of sweetening something. And you brought up honey, for instance. Honey contains natural sugar, right? And fruit sugar, fructose, is often confused with high fructose corn syrup, which is something different. It's a sugar, but it is a really, it's like not only vegetable oil, it's like fried vegetable oil, right? So it's really
oxidized.
bad.
Yeah, it's oxidized and is potentially dangerous.
But then you're talking about a lot of sugar in these typically these store brand energy drinks and soft drinks and soda pops and things like that.
That's correct.
And so a little natural sugar we like to use in the longevity products. For instance, you'll see fructose on the label. Now this is not to be confused with high fructose corn syrup, and we don't use much. You'll always see low calories, and so we like fruit sugar, and we like to use as little as possible. But the product also needs to taste as good as possible without using artificial ingredients. So a lot of sugar, a lot of natural sugar is bad. Even a small amount of things like high fructose corn syrup, you should avoid.
Yeah, well, the sugar oxidizes and turns into bad compounds, which cause inflammation. And so sugar, fried foods, heated oils, these are the things that cause plaque in your arteries. And if there's anything nice about plaque in your arteries can themselves heal themselves and the plaque will go away. Plaque has nothing to do with cholesterol. Heart disease has nothing to do with cholesterol. It was all a myth so that the pharmaceutical companies could sell their anti-cholesterol drugs.
So when you're talking about plaque can go away,
yes,
that's an interesting topic. So are we talking about, you know, if you're doing bad things, there's still hope to change your habits and your diet and make some lifestyle changes and correct some of the ills of a bad diet?
Yeah, well, the plaque in your arteries, remember your arteries are living tissue and they can heal themselves. They want to heal themselves. They have stem cells to heal themselves. Arteries, 2/3 of the thickness of the walls of arteries is connective tissue, the same stuff your tendons and ligaments are made out of, okay? And so the lining is what gets the plaque. And it's kind of like when people get eczema, okay? When they get eczema, that's or psoriasis, that's a really thick, scratchy, yucky skin stuff, itchy and red and miserable, sometimes drippy. And it's caused by a deficiency of a single nutrient. Caused by a deficiency of a single nutrient. And it's because people, again, eat gluten and eat fried foods and they eat oils and so forth. And so even if you're supplementing with that nutrient, you can't efficiently absorb it. You wind up with all those problems. But now you get rid of the gluten and the fried foods and the oils and the other bad stuff, and you take the 90 essential nutrients, your arteries will heal themselves. And even if they're like 95% blocked with plaque, and the doctors want to put in stents and do bypass surgeries and all this kind of stuff, well, guess what? Your arteries will heal themselves. Say, well, can I have 30 days or 60 days? Well, yeah. Okay, we'll schedule you 60 days from now. Well, usually in 30, 60 days, your arteries have been working to heal themselves. You might go from 95% blockage to say 85% blockage. Well, that's a 10% improvement. Okay. And they say, well, yeah, we've just, done an ultrasound and for some reason you're only 85%. Well, let me have another month or two. And now it goes to 72%. And so then say 6 months to a year, your arteries can heal themselves and all that plaque go away without the risk of surgery and stents and bypasses. Now, if you have 99% blockage, you might want to have
You're in trouble. At that point.
Yeah, at that point, you may want to have a stent put in or a bypass surgery to save yourself. But then you got to do all the right things so that 99% of the blockage goes away. Okay. And it's one of those.
Okay, so we're running out of time here. So, is there something beyond gluten, oils, fried foods, and sugars on your list we want to talk about, or do we want to get into hydration?
Let's get into hydration.
Okay, so hydration. Why is hydration important?
Well, circulation is very important, right? And blood is mostly water. Okay, lymph is.
Well, and yeah, I mean, so a huge part, probably the biggest part of the human body is actually water, right?
That's water, correct.
And so if you have a deficiency of water, you're dehydrated, right? So hydration is one of the key things that make everything work.
Well, you can die pretty quickly, from being dehydrated, especially in heat and so forth. You can't keep your body cool from the evaporation of water off your skin. And you can't circulate nutrition. You can't circulate bad foods to get rid of the bad foods through your urine and bowel movements and things like that. And so hydration is extremely important. You might not survive 3 days without water in the desert, right? Kind of thing. And so those things are all very, very important here. And so, and of course, I like our Rebound because it has 100 nutrients, 78 minerals. Where else are you going to get an energy drink, a soft drink, a sports drink, a nutrient replacement drink that has 78 minerals in it?
Well, and Rebound was created because of your relationship with the all-star Theo Ratliff, right? Because, I mean, you were helping him overcome some personal health challenges. And he was an all-star player playing for the Atlanta Hawks with Lenny Wilkins and Mike Glenn and Phil Oliver back then. And so you were helping him with his bone and joint issues. And, Gatorade's been, a popular thing among athletes for quite a while. But, I think you quickly realized that Gatorade's really salt water. I mean, it doesn't have much in it but sodium and water.
Okay, and a little bit of sugar.
Yeah.
Okay, and so things like Gatorade and Red Bull, they're actually, I would call them energy drinks because they're mostly sugar. And so Rebound, of course, Theo Ratliff, he'd lost his contract with the Atlanta Hawks. He was in big trouble. He had bone arthritis in his knees. He had the cartilage pop off his hip. He had fractured his wrist. He said he's too fragile to play pro ball. We rebuilt him in 90 days with the 90 essential nutrients and the Rebound. And he gets a $40 million contract, okay, and played for 11 more years. And so let's see, what's 10 times 40? Would you look at that? It's one of those things where, and we deal with so many professional athletes, okay. Evander Holyfield, he had a heart attack, boxer, heavyweight champion, and he couldn't box anymore until we got a hold of him again. And we rebuilt him using the 90 essential nutrients and our sports drink Rebound and so forth. And guess what?
Well, now I've talked to, obviously I know Theo pretty well. I've spoken with Evander Holyfield. Don't know him nearly as well as you do, but I do remember getting a legal threatening letter from one of the major hydration drink companies. Mm-hmm. I won't say which one, but because several of the basketball players were drinking Rebound in branded cups that weren't Rebound at the NBA games and NBA finals. And so some of our distributors figured out what was going on, and they were posting and and promoting the fact that these NBA players were drinking Rebound instead of something else. And so that company didn't like it and sent us a kind of a nasty grin. But yeah, no, Rebound's a very popular hydration drink, and we have a lot of great hydration drinks, and we have a lot of great supplements that can contribute to hydration, like Pollen Burst, one of our most popular products. It's a nutritional product, but you add it to water, obviously, and Saxy and ACT and things like this. But Rebound is really a true hydration and renutrification drink for things like exercise.
Yeah, and nutrient replacement. Of course, Evander Holyfield, he came back and he boxed for 3 more years after he has a heart attack, and he was told he'd never box again. And it took him, 1 year out to heal himself and everything, and get on our program, our diet, and our supplements, and everything. And he comes back and boxes for 3 more. He had to fight and take back his championship because he gave it up. But they were saying, "Oh, you're back now. We're not going to give it back to you. You got to box and take it back if you want it." Okay. And so these are the sort of things we do all the time. And of course, if people will use our thing, one of the things I did was I did 1,700 autopsies on kids under the age of 10 years of age in Qishan province, China, through all the efforts of Milan's family, and they had a lot of connections and everything there. Because Qishan disease is the same thing, deficiency that kills people from the sudden heart deaths when they're an athlete. 25,000 athletes in America under the age of 20 each year die from this sudden heart death. Is caused by deficiency of a single nutrient. And so I did 1,700 autopsies, and through April 16th, 2013, a federal judge ruled in our favor. We had to put that nutrient in baby formulas, and we eliminated crib death. We eliminated, that's a big claim.
So we're talking hydration and
nutrition.
So all that, but we're running out of time. So what I want to do is, and again, point people to that blog post because it goes through a lot of that. But what we'll do is we'll do another one of these and see what people want to hear more of, and so we'll plan on another one. But for now, why don't we go ahead and wrap this up? And thank you so much for being on again on Doc Monday, and always obviously a wealth of knowledge and history and great information. So with that, everybody have a great week. Talk to you soon.
God bless, and thank you very much.